Hello, I'm Mischievous Marcinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and all of the Amazing Spider-Man annuals, which I say do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I say definitely count. And hey, we just got a solicit for the annual for this volume coming up early next year. So you know what? The format is alive. But for me, Amazing Fantasy number 15 continues to remain a fantasy.
I'm looking forward to the series Amazing Spider-Man Annual Volume 7, I guess. Whatever, Dan. You know, however you need to catalog it. Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, a non-annual review.
Today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, number 16, which is Legacy Issue 980. This issue was written by Joe Kelly. The cover and interiors feature pencils by John Romita Jr., inks by Scott Hanna, colors by Marcio Menyz, and of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on November 19th, 2025. Mark, hit us with a recap of the events of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, number 16, and as I said, that is also Legacy 980.
The comic opens with glimpses at our four core storylines: Peter Parker's apartment with Ben Reilly, Aunt May's apartment, Tombstone's mansion, and a secret lab in Midtown where Norman Osborn is located. All four of our characters are dealing with their own conflicts with Peter. Ben is stressed. May is getting messaged by someone concerned about her nephew. Tombstone knows something is up with this new Spider-Man, and Norman is battling his self-doubt. We close the sequence with some resolution. For Ben, this charade is gonna wrap up soon, in 2 weeks with a healthcare plan probably. May is inviting Jonah, the messenger, over to talk about Peter. Tombstone is planning on settling up soon, and Norman grabs his Spidey suit and goes out to do some web slinging. We continue fully with Norman, who repeats his mantra about taking on Peter's dream in his absence, but also acknowledges that he needs Spider-Man 2. Flashing over to Rand Enterprises, Ben/Peter and Brian celebrate the success of their experiment with Astrid. Brian finally stepped up, pulled an all-nighter, and delivered on his half of their experiment. Astrid drives the knife squarely in Ben's heart when she lets him know the name Peter Parker will be associated with changing the world. In Central Park, once again, completely empty, except for our main characters, perhaps because most New Yorkers have now left the city following the election of a communist mayor. Norman and Dr. O.M. try to continue their conversation from the coffee shop. Asmani finally reveals the secret about her son. He's dying. He's gone through all sorts of treatments, but it's only a matter of time. She asks Norman how he copes with losing a child. Still, Spider-Man duty calls, and Norman has to take off, gaining an appreciation for Peter's constant sacrifice, which meant putting Spider-Man responsibilities over helping a friend in need. The Spidey call brings Norman over to Tombstone and his henchman, Plague Prescription? RX? Dan, I'm gonna be real. Am I supposed to know this guy?
No, not really. I think he appeared 4 issues ago for a couple of pages with the Shocker. Kind of an abrupt introduction to this character.
So it's not even a first appearance. So I gotta, this comic has no collectible value. Sad.
First cover.
First cover, that's true. Okay, and it's a good cover. But before we get to that fight, May and her beau have a sit down with Jonah, where Jonah discusses needing to fix Peter. The men start talking about an intervention, but May interrupts the mansplaining with one of her more impassioned speeches in comic history about her nephew, his needs, and the fact that she's a mother and understands how Peter works. She tells them to get right off of Peter's back because he will return, where he'll get a nice kick in the pants from her, followed by some wheat cakes. So there. And Dan, you know about those wheat cakes. They're delicious, right?
Absolutely. Had them from you at my bachelor party.
That's, I mean, if that's not a scene out of something wonderful, I don't know what is. We return to Spider-Norman, Tombstone, and Plague Prescription. And Tombstone is like, seriously, what is up with you, dude? Norman answers in rigid, non-Spidey platitudes, which allows Tombstone to breathe a sigh of relief that this is not actually Spider-Man. So he then sicks Plague Prescription on him, and the two start throwing down. Plague transfers Shocker's pain from his prior fight with Norman to Norman, and it looks like fake Spider-Man is down for the count before he rallies and starts beating the crap out of Tombstone. He lets Tombstone know that his world is pain, which I'm pretty sure was Andrew Cuomo's concession speech, though I could be wrong. That clinches it for Tombstone that this Spider-Man ain't the real Spider-Man, so Norman swings off while hearing a distant laughter in his ears. As the voices in Norman's head remind him that he's a fraud, he admits that the whole charade is making him tired, leading him to question, what would Peter do? Meanwhile, Ben has accessed the experiment he and Brian completed. He stares at their names and decides to change the experiment's details, but we are left with no clear answer about what he did.
I think, of the Joe Kelly run, our previous discussion, what was it, issue 14 of this ongoing Earthside story in the realm of Spider-Man and Peter Parker's life, was maybe the lowest we had gone on this run since issue 1. Maybe some of those Hellgate issues, but we really were like, okay, is this story going to progress? Is it spinning its wheels? Is there enough meat here to really balance out what's going on with Peter in space, and how much we were itching just to get back to that Peter in space thing? Did this issue change that for you in any meaningful way?
Yeah, it did for me. I mean, I think that the main thing that this issue accomplished is, I think it got to some interesting character beats with some other characters like Aunt May and Tombstone that we really haven't been getting so far in this Earthside storyline. I mean, I still feel like we're kind of repeating beats with like the likes of Norman and Ben, and Ben, we still just don't Ben has like kind of been riding this bicycle for a few issues now, where he's just like, yeah, I'm only going to do this a little longer. You know what I mean? He seems like ready to throw in the towel, but we're still reading a comic book about him, I guess. So, but like, I think having these other character moments, that frankly were more illuminating about Peter than they were about Norman and Ben, made this a more satisfying read for me, because it's kind of like this, the Superior Spider-Man, when that storyline was really going well and we really enjoyed it, where even though Peter is not in the webs right now, the book is very much a statement about him and what he is doing or not doing, and how everyone reacts to that. And I felt like this kind of captured that essence of that era very well.
I agree with all of that. I think the supporting cast really steps up here, or supporting of the supporting cast, if you will, because Ben and Norman are, I guess, supporting cast that have been elevated. But I think this sort of framing, like you said, a reflection of Peter, it's in the text here, right? Like, what would Peter do, And I think what is done in this issue is a meaningful step forward from what we've been getting. And I think it's a nuanced, meaningful step forward, but one that is pregnant with opportunity, I guess is the word, or major change that coming to play, not only in the next couple issues, but also for when Peter returns. And that's really exciting to see. And I also think we don't get a ton of psychological stuff with Ben, although you can read a lot into the few pages that we got. We get a ton of psychological stuff with Norman, and I think where it's going and how it's explored here is absolutely fascinating. And I can't wait to talk with you about not just what Joe Kelly is writing on the page, but how JRJR is translating it in art onto the page, because there's some really strange stuff going on here that, again, I think is quite nuanced. And that's what I really appreciated about this particular chapter is I think there is a level of sophistication and maturity to the writing here that I'm not going to say the previous writers that you and I have covered, from Slott, Spencer, Wells, are unable to do something like this, because certainly we've seen them all, write brilliant comics that are like mature and really thoughtful. But I don't think they've been able to sustain it in the way that Joe Kelly has. And so I'm so much more bought into the nuances and the ride that he's on that I believe in the value of every little thing that he's doing. And it really pays off in an issue like this where ostensibly, it checks in with a bunch of people and nothing really major happens, but it feels like something major happens because of how long we've been on this like kind of very character-oriented chain. And frankly, this is what Spider-Man comics used to be. I mean, it's a little more high level and meta and high concept than the Spider-Man from the 60s through the early 90s. But it feels like the kind of rhythm and pace and interest in its world and characters like Spider-Man used to be. And an issue like this shows how that pays off in spades.
I think what this comic is doing differently than maybe some of its predecessors had done in like similar kinds of storylines is I feel like this comic very sincerely misses Peter in the forefront right now, and is kind of mourning the fact that Peter isn't there. And it's not, this isn't so much he's not there because he's messing up or he's letting people down. I mean, he, that's implied, but it's not like, like compared to say like the Wells run where, like that was a core part of like the beginning half of his run, which was like, Peter screwed up and everyone's mad at him. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of past that now. And instead we're kind of just focused on like, he is not here and people are feeling his absence, and and the book misses him and the people around him miss him. So, for me, what taking this approach does and being sincere and authentic about it, it sets up for when his return comes, it's going to have a bigger impact versus where, say like the end is Superior, where, we kind of had gotten used to not Peter being in the driver's seat, and then it was like all of a sudden, well, he's back and we should all be happy. You know what I mean? Like, this is setting it up where like we really kind of, Norman is clearly struggling. Ben is struggling. May is struggling. Tombstone is just like, something's not right. I don't like where this is. Like I felt like the framing between those four characters was very smart in showing it through the lens of Peter not being there. So like, not only is this a strong issue, but it does a really good job of kind of setting up the hero moment that we will inevitably get, in a few months' time when Peter is back in the saddle.
And we've kind of dinged this story for kind of feeling like a repeat of what was going on in Wells, like, are we really going to see Norman fall from grace again? Are we really going to, see Peter and Tombstone like on the outs and et cetera? But like, yes, I think some of that is absolutely fair. Like, are we going down that road again? And frankly, again, I'm not super eager to see the Goblin resurface, and I don't necessarily know that that's where that's going. Although we do get a sort of allusion to it.
Sure.
In this issue. But like, again, I have to really credit Kelly for taking what came before and rolling with it. Like, even in this issue with Tombstone, where, he's like, Tombstone is like, stacking up those weights and talking to Plague Pharmacy or Plague Prescription rather, and saying, hey, like, I at least owe him a conversation before any movement forward. And that is earned from
Yeah.
the history from the Wells run and I guess the Norman stuff too, all the way back to the Spencer run. So like Kelly was given these setups and is rolling with it in its own way. And I think where he's taken it has started to diverge in this issue, especially in a way that I particularly find enjoyable. I wanted to kind of talk like kind of globally about the comic before we pick it apart. Like, I really think there's this really cool formal element to the opening of this comic that like maybe it's just a novelty writing trick, and we've seen, I don't know if you're like caught up on the Ultimates series that has done like 2 issues where the page is split into 4 parts and each page has one update on 4 separate stories of different timelines. This is not quite to that level, but it's doing that sort of like throwing you into 4 different things. You kind of are unmoored in space and time, and the visuals are not entirely clear. So that, you're having to kind of, I reread it a couple times before I felt really solidly, like I could really solidly grasp it. I really think it's really cool, and it gives a very different feel to this before you ultimately then go and explore those 4 different storylines.
Right.
But I appreciate, and I think we've said this several times, I really appreciate that Joe Kelly is not just writing like issues of Amazing Spider-Man that like you read in a volume. Like I feel like every single issue, even if this isn't a contained story, it formally feels like it is. Like it opens on a sunrise on New York City and closes on the sunset, right? So you get this whole, it's a 24, or over 12 hours in New York City. These are the things that transpired. Like there's a real attention to formal detail to make each issue feel special, its own thing, and to have a real persona. And again, I don't want to take that for granted because I don't think that it's something every comic run does.
Yeah, no, 100%. And on top of just the artistry of it, like I felt it was a good device just to kind of set up who are we focusing on in this comic? You know what I mean? Like I feel like we've kind of had this format over the last several years that, not that there was anything wrong with it per se, but it was just kind of like, we're kind of jumping around and we open with one character and then we kind of do our check-ins and, we would get the Jonah check-in separate from the May one, and then those stories might intertwine at some point, and then we would see what Norman was up to and what Tombstone was up to, and like I think opening the comic the way it did and kind of like quartering it and being like no these are the 4 storylines, and they all had one common thread, which was this idea of like we are struggling with the absence of Peter or Spider-Man, as the case may be. I think it was just a good narrative device to kind of set up the issue, and like we really, even though other characters kind of came in and out, whether it be Jonah or Dr. Osmani or Brian, I think in doing it that way, it also really focused the story and kept it very kind of driven and contained and without it getting too far flung and a little scattershot.
I think all of that is true and aided by the work of John Romita Jr., who is back in full force here. I mean, I think any kind of complaints that we had about like the previous issues with Hellgate being a bit lackluster
right.
in our regard to him is like completely removed from an issue that looks as beautiful as this, but also it does what John Romita Jr. does best, which like I think is very highlighted in an issue like this, which isn't really full of superhero like action, although there are definitely some stunning, I'm thinking of the stunning splash page, the Amazing Fantasy 15 homage that kind of like opens a construction sequence. But whether this is maybe like stolen from JMS, because JMS did this, is the sort of like, instead of the swinging over the city sequences, you get the like thought sequences with Norman is very in his head while he's doing a dynamic action sequence that like is largely silent and feels like it's happening in the background. of these things, but that's a dramatic version. But then you get like little moments where like Tombstone is racking up his weights, like while he's talking to Plague Pharmacy, or sorry, Plague Prescription. Sorry, Plague RX. I'm just gonna keep doing
However you want to call it.
Yeah. Like JRJR has such a great skill at grounding these characters and giving them the sort of like weight and real world feel to them that feels like just a day in the life of these people. And maybe his stuff doesn't look the most photorealistic, but it doesn't matter because the pencils just do all of the heavy lifting, whether it's from like a construction point of view of like, this is a really well laid out page, down to just like the little details of, how someone's straining or there's, et cetera. And you see why this guy is such a master at his craft. Cause like compare him to Pepe Larraz, Pepe could not pack more detail into a page if he wanted to. And JRJR is kind of the exact opposite. And I would put them on absolutely equal footing as comic book storytellers.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, like I said, I mean, as you alluded to, there were some moments with JRJR over the last few months where I was kind of like, is this still the book for him? But I feel like he kind of earned a lot of it back, and and not for nothing, like we got a lot of Tombstone in this book again. And he and Romita just loves Tombstone, and maybe that's just like having that again kind of just lit a fire under him. I don't know, but it was good stuff. I mean, it was good to see this book look as good as the Larraz books have looked so far. So
absolutely. So I think Norman is the kind of standout character. Obviously the book is mostly focused on him with a couple of other asides. So let's talk about him first, because I think there's some really kind of interesting dramatic stuff going on behind the scenes here, both in the like text itself, but the subtext too, I think is screaming throughout this issue. Anything that stood out to you in particular, about Norman in this issue?
Well, I mean, we kind of get it up early, which is the line of, I need Spider-Man 2, which I think is just kind of, if you could boil down this whole storyline into one phrase, I think it's that right now, which is just, Norman, in what I feel is true to form to this character. He's couching this whole experience as like, oh, I'm taking on Peter's dream, and it's my obligation, it's my duty. And maybe he believes that to some degree, but like I think at its core this is all about Norman trying to figure something out for himself and finding that he needs to be Spider-Man to figure it out. I don't think he's being as altruistic about it as he wants us to believe, we being the readers, that, when he's narrating. I think he is getting something out of this. I think he's trying to redeem himself. I think he is trying to feel something that and understand something, like that whole sequence towards the end where, he's with Dr. Osmani and he has to kind of take off, and he's just like, he's done this all this time. And like, as a reader, I'm kind of like, yeah, duh, like welcome to the last 63 years of comics, Norman. But like, I think it's this real experience for him as a character to see this and to actually feel this and see for himself how this is supposed to work. I don't know what that's all going to resolve in. I know you have your theories, and even have theories coming out of this issue. I'm not entirely sold that's where we're going to go yet. But it's interesting to see Norman kind of go on this experience and kind of, maybe try to lie to himself a little bit about it and see at the end, no, he's doing this selfishly, even if there's some good that's coming out of it, Well,
what's striking to me, and I agree with all of that, is actually how honest Norman is kind of being about himself in doing this. There's this, like, on the same page as the I Need Spider-Man 2 and that whole construction worker saving scene, you've got the journal entry that's laying out, like, that he has always lied to himself about the things he desires. And he runs down a list of it, like, oh, I didn't actually want a child. What I wanted was a clone. I didn't actually want power as the Goblin. Maybe it started off with me trying to take control of these various gangs, but really, what's the motive of the Goblin? It's to terrify and hurt people, and specifically Peter Parker, right? And it's funny that I read this because, like, the very same day, my son and I he likes to read this Spider-Man book that it was gifted to him, and it kind of recaps a lot of the, like, Ditko stories early on, and he likes reading the Goblin one, and he asked me, he's like, but why is Gabi doing this?
Right.
Because the Gabi on the cartoon show that he likes to watch is just a silly prankster, right?
Right.
But the Gabi in this book is tying up Spider-Man and revealing his identity and blah, 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 blah. And it's a good question. Like, you could ask this about many of Spider-Man's rogues, and that's why the Gauntlet was such a thrilling kind of reinvention of so many of them, is because their motives have been lost, if there were any, a long time ago. Like, what is Electro's motive? Lord knows. Like, he was a bank thief. Why is he still in this? I don't know. Power to the people tried, right? And the reality with the Goblin is there really is no motive other than, like, a selfish desire to just, like, hurt other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the same is true here. He even admits, like, I got into this saying I was protecting Peter's dream, but, like, really, it seems like his goal is to disappear into the role in order to escape his own legacy, right? And feel how Spider-Man makes other people feel, as if they were feeling it towards Norman Osborn, which he in this issue says they would never feel this way around Norman Osborn. And then there's this moment later when he's meeting with Dr. O.M. on the bridge where he admits, oh, people usually say that I'm not like an easy hang. It's not how he puts it, but like that, like, he's a very difficult person to work with. And she's like, actually, you've been surprisingly charming. And it's like, like Norman is disappearing into a different person's body. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But like, I find his journal, as much as it is a real reflection of his thoughts, actually quite revealing and honest about how he's not doing this altogether altruistically. And that's interesting to see that level of self-reflection going on. So anyway, I agree with you, but I also think, like, Norman knows that that's true.
He's not. Yeah. He's not. We're past the part that he's lying about it, but, like, I still think it's interesting that he, even as he's coming forward more about it in his narrative, he's still kind of like couching it like, well, I still want to keep his dream alive. But,
I don't think Norman understands the depths that he's yet willing to go on a selfish crusade here, as we might surmise. We could surprise us, but, like, the narrative, especially that final, like, kind of laughing line, suggests that, like, there is a sinister element that, like, he is choosing not to acknowledge entirely.
Yeah. So what was your take on his scene with Dr. O.M.? I mean, I thought this was a really well put together scene. I also kind of like that, after kind of baiting this mystery angle with her kid, we just kind of said what's going on. Although, if this is a reach, Dan, I apologize. I immediately thought, especially given where the comic is like, are we going to find out her son is, the RX or, prescription Man or whatever his name is.
I mean, that would be a swerve. I mean, I think to me, this is about as much of a reveal as you possibly could that her son is Kintsugi.
Okay. Or that. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the last, time we in issue 14, that was actually my, if you remember, I surmised the way that Kintsugi was talking was as if he was like a dying boy. And here we get, my son is dying,
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
no, you're right. You're right.
I think that's about as much of an admission as we're likely going to get that until it's just outright said that that's who her son is. Like, could it swerve and be that there's something with plague prescription? See, I got it right that time and wrong.
There you go. Yeah. You got it.
Well, okay, so a couple things interesting about the scene. I mean, first of all, the joke you made about Central Park, yes, absolutely.
There's never anybody there, Dad. Yeah. I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, even in that particular framing, it makes me think of the Peter and MJ scene from Spider-Man 3.
I didn't think about that, but that's a good pull.
I mean, that's the same bridge, right? It's Bow Bridge in Central Park.
Yep.
I mean, I know there's a lot of bridges in Central Park that are like this, but not.
And it's a famous bridge, but yes, it's a good pull.
I mean, as far as I know, there's no like real deep history with that spot in the comics. I mean, I know Peter and Mary Jane, I think, walk across it in all my
tomorrows.
Past.
All my past remembers. Sorry. Yeah.
But I don't think it's quite like they walk across all of Central Park in that issue, right? It's not
sure.
I don't think the bridge gets a special shout out,
I also think there were other people in the park when they walked across it in that issue.
Absolutely.
But that's okay. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
But anyway, it made me think of that movie in the same way the end of the scene made me think of Spider-Man 1 where Norman is choosing to walk away in the same kind of framing device as the end of the first, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. But the thing that's most interesting to me about this scene is the way JRJR draws Norman Osborn. Because to me, this is like, it just screamed at me from the page that he's drawing Peter Parker. Like, I've never seen him draw Norman like this, like de-aged, if you will. Like, literally, if you look at the page, there are several moments where I think he looks like Richard Parker. Like an older Peter, really becoming that father figure. And he's even adopted, like, I think Peter's, like body language and mannerisms. He's like looser and kind of like hunches his shoulders in a way that like a power figure like Norman, I don't think I've ever seen him emote that way. And then the most interesting thing is the hair, because you've got the wind that's blowing through the scene, but he has the Peter Parker spit curl coming out of his hair. And I've never seen Norman drawn like that. Not to mention the sort of like vertical rows of his hair. But that's kind of more conventional JRJR. But the spit curl is prominent throughout the scene. And I think that's everything right there is Norman has not only like, put on the costume of Spider-Man, he is adopting every inch of it, and it is slowly transforming him into Peter Parker. And that's, I think, absolutely fascinating. I think it's definitely intentional in the artwork. And it makes me think that Norman is not going to want to let go of being Peter Parker when Peter returns.
Yeah, I think we are absolutely getting set up for a conflict here. Maybe that's, and I'm just speculating here, but I mean, maybe that is frankly more impactful than Norman going back to the Goblin is this idea. And, we all know how Peter is in terms of his guilt and whatnot when he, with things like this, but like, it's this question of, I mean, we saw it with Ben too. And maybe it's a larger question of like, when you get a taste of Spider-Man, like how, can you just walk away from it? I don't know. Maybe we're going to have a larger sense of that out of this storyline, because I feel like we have that in two different, on two different paths right now with this book. So I don't know, but that's a great read of the artwork. It's, I think that frankly, you can only convey that from an artist like Romita, because he has such a history with these characters. Like, I mean, we've seen him do Norman how many times over the years?
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, yeah, and not even just in this run. I just mean, like, or even recent runs, like, I mean, going back into the 2000s, early 2000s. So I think, like,
and beyond that, even like adopting his father's, thing that he invented. The curl is Romita Sr. Putting his father's visual stamp on Norman Osborn is fascinating. Yeah,
for sure. But I feel like having him make these choices and then execute them, I think it just carries so much more heft, narrative heft to it than if, and this is not to diminish Pepe Larraz or even, Red McGuinness or any of them, but like, like you're not going to get the same impact of that watching that transformation from one of them as you would from a John Romita Jr. who has done this with these characters for years now.
Totally. Like, and I think that's probably why it screamed off the page to me.
Yeah,
I just had never seen Norman drawn that way. And I know what JRJR's Peter looks like. To that point, I know what JRJR's Richard Parker looks like, yeah. Even down to what his Goblin looks like. I commissioned JRJR to do, like a Norman Osborn. I believe you have that, don't you?
Yeah, it's on my wall over here, but you can't see it in the camera
right
now.
But like his Goblin and Norman, like you can see the man behind the mask. Like it's really like all you got to do is put a little like, ponytail, so to speak, on the back of him, and you got his Goblin. This is not that character on the page here. So that's fascinating, the sort of physical transformation. On to Dr. Osmani. Is it Osmani Milton? Are we going to meet the other half, if there is another half? I assume not. There seems to be, back to the sort of like shipping of Norman and Dr. O.M., this like made me think, oh, maybe there is actually something to that here. There does seem to be some kind of like charmed spark going on here. If you can ignore the sort of like complications around the death of Harry Osborn, I found this kind of connection between the loss of a son very touchingly written in this comic, especially when paired up with the Aunt May scene that we're going to talk about later.
Right.
But I have to say, like, and I'm just going to flag this here, for sort of like my speculation. We get this sort of idea of like, I've done everything possible to try to save this child, every science, and like I'm just kind of like having to accept that he's going to go, right? And in the same issue, we are sort of introduced to the power set of a guy who can ostensibly take the pain from one person and transfer it to someone else, right? So how do you save your dying child? You transfer that death to someone else, and that could be a way for Norman to redeem himself. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, you set up dominoes like that. Anyway,
or is this how we finally write out Ben Reilly for good? I mean,
yeah.
I'm not being facetious.
No.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And also the fact that this is sort of like a teen figure, a teen, superhero, like Norman knowing how he plagued the life of a teen superhero, like a way to make amends by sort of giving another child the life that he's kind of denied Peter. Anyway, I really just want to see redemption for Norman Osborn is what I'm after. But I can't wish cast that into existence. But
when you speculate like this, I'm just going to start calling it like the Dan Kavazin Lookout Award. Of the issue. So this is what gets the Lookout Award.
It does,
play the
I will say, like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but this seems more substantive than Lookout, and given that, like, but it is definitely like casting
I don't know.
dozens of issues into the future. Yeah.
You were pretty convinced, Dan.
I
don't know.
I was pretty convinced. All right. So, moving on so I can hide my head in shame. Let's talk about Tombstone. You seemed, pretty jazzed about his appearance here. What'd you like about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we haven't seen Tombstone much recently, so like there is an element of kind of like, oh, okay, we're supposed to care about this guy again, even though like we really don't have a lot here. But at the same time, like I just love that, even without knowing the identities of the people in play here, like it absolutely tracked for me that Tombstone is perceptive enough to be like, oh, okay, you're not Spider-Man. We're good. You know what I mean? Like it was just kind of, I think it was both a good comedic beat, but also just a good character beat in terms of like, yes, of all of the kind of henchmen in New York, who would pick up the fastest, and given the recent history, I think Tombstone is the one. Like I it was just a good way of kind of elevating that, like, again,
where
like,
was this level of insight during Superior? But yeah.
Well, I was just about to
Yeah.
well, I was literally just about to say, Dan, like, not to constantly compare / knock it about Superior, but like, it was kind of, that was always like this maddening blind spot for me during that run, which was like, of course everyone would know. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like this guy has nothing, like, it's not acting anything like Spider-Man. And like, not for nothing, I feel like, not that Norman is doing a great job trying to be Peter, but like
he's doing a closer job than Otto.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But like, it's clear in how he talks and how he presents himself that it's not the same person. So like, I just appreciate that, not only are we not like insulting the intelligence of the readers, we're not insulting the intelligence of the characters in the universe. Like, of course they're like, yeah, no, this guy is somebody else. I'm not going to have any qualms about kicking his ass now because he's clearly a fraud. So that was really kind of the extent of it. I just like that. It just feels like, and I don't think it's intentional, because Joe Kelly doesn't seem to be this kind of person to cast judgment on past creators, but like, it just like, it felt very vindicating to me as a reader that we had this level of insight from one of the villains, and I just appreciated it for it.
Even watching him break Tombstone's arm, and Tombstone's reaction where it's like, all right, like, unload on this guy was a really nice moment. And there's getting back to the art really quickly. There's this thing that JRJR does in this with Marcio Menyz where they fade the panels into like this gradient of gray to move in and out of memory. And I just wanted to highlight it because I thought it was a really nice touch to sort of like imply the subconscious and move in and out of the scene with where the character's mind is. But also to note, like, hey, look, like during the Wells run, we knew JRJR was having fun when he was turning pages, vertically and stuff like that. Like, this guy's been around forever, but he's still experimenting with like new ways of doing things. And like, what a cool thing, to see from a creator with his legacy. So, yeah. So speaking of which, we get like a JRJR designed, new villain, or new-ish villain, right? He appeared, I think, during those like initial Hellgate issues, or at least in the past few issues during this Earthbound story. But we didn't know much about him. It was a very like random thing. But like, we don't get a ton of character work here, but the power set is actually really compelling, I think.
Yeah.
The idea that he could like bank a bunch of pain and then, suffer having to deal with that pain himself, only to then unleash it on someone. I thought it really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like I said, I was more caught up in like Am I supposed to know everything about this guy yet? Because I don't. But but that's that's more of a fault on me on how I read the comics. Like I'm like I think I saw this guy, but anyway.
I do. I do think like if I had one major criticism of this issue, it's like how short this scene is with him. I feel like,
yeah.
especially in the days of extended page counts, or I say extended normal page counts, we are in the land of 21 page comics versus however many we used to get. We would probably have gotten a full meal of a fight or interaction between, Plague and Norman. And I feel like, we thought that issue 14 was really like fluffed up, right? And kind of spinning its wheels. I feel like if you could have taken some of the stuff we got elsewhere in this comic and transferred it there and allowed for a full kind of like Spider-Man fight here on this rooftop, you would have gotten a sort of like better balance between the identities of this issue, especially for one with him on the cover. He feels like such a minor beat. I would have loved to have seen this villain kind of put his paces through with Spider-Man and explore that a little bit more. I'm not asking for the comic to go back to the sort of like villain of the week dominated structure, but maybe a little bit more of that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't fight that. You want to talk about Ben in this comic?
Sure, let's talk about Ben. We get maybe 3 or 4 pages of him, but some interesting stuff.
It's interesting, but like I don't know, Dan. I still feel like this is just the weak link of this storyline right now. Is what does Ben Reilly want, and what is he gonna do? Like I like, and if it's not the weak link, it's certainly the part I'm least interested in right now.
Yeah,
because I feel like. Norman's story, as we talked about, is so much richer, even if we do repeat certain elements of it. I mean, we repeat, but then kind of like admit like, okay, that's just a farce. I'm feeling this. Ben, it's like we're repeating, but not necessarily like getting more transparent about it. Like we got this 2 issues ago. He was kind of like, yeah, I can't keep doing this, but like he's still doing it. You know what I mean? And I have a feeling in 2 issues, he's still going to be doing it, Dan. And I don't know what his ultimate end game is with Brian and this experiment. And like, there were some interesting things like in the mix of it. Like, I really did like that scene with Astrid when she was just like, and the world's going to remember Peter Parker. Like, but like, I also feel like in its own right, it's just a repetitive beat with Ben. Like he, that's his whole shtick is like he cannot create his own identity, like we know that at this point. Like so like I'm kind of at the point with this character of like, so now what are you going to do? It just seems unclear or uninteresting to me what his next move is.
Well, I think we're bound to find that out because whatever the next move is, he seems to take it at the end of the issue, right?
Right, but to what end, I guess.
Right, we don't know. And I'm sure we'll find out shortly. And you can speculate that I don't have any particular thing. Like the question I ask by the end of the issue is like, okay, what is he going to do? Is he deleting Peter's name? Is he sabotaging the project and for Peter and like mistakenly bringing down Brian along with him? And the other question is like, was it always his intent to do this? Because here, did he intend to be Peter to sabotage his life? But to me, it seems more like my read, at least right now, is just like Norman, he kind of saw an opportunity to escape into this role.
Yeah.
And the opposite of Norman is happening for him, where like the more he's in this role, the more he like hates Peter, right? And like is begrudging Peter, right? For the existence that Peter is allowed to live that he's not allowed to live. Whereas Norman is understanding Peter, better and better and maybe not wanting to let go of that. Ben is looking for any opportunity he can to erase or destroy Peter in order to allow himself to not have to live in the shadow of all the things that Peter gets to do. That's kind of my current read.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my read is a little different than that. I mean, my read has been more along the lines of, we in the last run, Ben more or less said to Peter, like, the next time I come, I'm coming for your life, kind of a thing. And like, we certainly saw during Beyond this idea of like Ben, like just being, like almost basically being like, just give me your life. You know what I mean? Like, and I I kind of see it the a little bit differently in terms of like I don't know if he hates or resents Peter, but I think like he's realizing like he can't just take Peter's life.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like, I mean, even the little bit with Astrid when she like
But
touches his arm, like
yeah,
he's having a seeming romantic success there, right? Like she seems to be
yeah,
coming on to him in some way there that's like, an intimacy. And obviously the name Peter Parker is going to be on it, and he can't enjoy those things because it will always be Peter.
right,
Yeah.
right. But I guess, and I guess like how it ultimately manifests is what will be revealed as the story goes along. But like I am. I guess from my mind, I'm not seeing this as like it's going to create some kind of physical or emotional conflict with Peter. I just kind of see this as like something that Ben has to figure out from. That's why I made the comment about, Plague RX,
Sorry, who?
and sorry, Plague Prescription, because I'm like, is Ben just like, there's a part of me that's like through this whole experience, is Ben just going to be like, I can't do this anymore. Like, just wipe me out, take me off this earth. I don't want to be revived by the Jackal. I don't want to be revived by anybody. Like I am a clone. I don't have a life. I don't have a purpose. I just need to go away. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that was, rather than trying to fight for something and resent Peter for it. Like that's kind of where I'm seeing this go. I'm not seeing this as some kind of conflict that Ben is going to have with Peter. Or try to destroy Peter in some way. I mean, I could be very wrong here. I'm not, I leave that open. But like, I'm seeing this more set up as like Ben just kind of like finally finding a way to kind of like fade into darkness and go away. Maybe that's wishful thinking because like I just haven't been interested in this character in several years now. But like that's just been my read of it. It's just like he's just realizing I can't do this, then what's the freaking point anymore? You know what I mean? Like, why am I here? Like, cause like you could even feel like in scenes, he's like pushing Janine away cause he's just like, why? Like, what why? Like I created this life based on a lie and I don't feel he's got any kind of happiness anymore.
Well, so that's why I don't think he's going to fade away, because I think Janine is offering him the chance to fade away. She's like, hey, just come with me. Like, why are you continuing in this role? Why keep pretending to be Peter when we could just leave and start our own lives somewhere else? And he can't. Some part of him can't,
Yeah.
And whether
that's true.
whether he engaged in it with the intent to sabotage or just to do whatever, because he also has that interesting line in this where he's like, why him? Like, why Norman? Why did he choose Norman? And she says,
right.
Well, he chose you last time, but now, whether he chose it or not, Norman's filling that role. You can go and do whatever. Right. And he's chosen not to. And that face he makes when Astrid says, Peter Parker will be a household name. Like, I don't think that's the face of someone that just goes like, all right, like this is not my territory. Right. He's in that lab at the end and he does something on the computer like
it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. Yeah, let's just say that. So like, look, I agree with you. He's been the least interesting to me, but I actually feel like we got a lot of like at least sort of like where his headspace clarity is at.
Sure.
What he's going to do and when that plan hatched itself or whatever, I'm still yet to see, But this at least gave me enough to go like, okay, I know answers are coming based on whatever action he has chosen to take.
There you go. Now, of our core characters here, Aunt May,
I want you to talk about this because I know you've written a lot about the Aunt May gumption speech and things like that.
Well,
And
yeah,
this just
this
screamed Mark Ginocchio to me when I read this on the page.
This was a wonderful scene.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't want to take credit of being the Aunt May analyzer of the internet. Although I guess there are far worse outcomes.
I just know you really like this aspect of the character, and when people highlight it, and so like I loved it too. I just read this and I was like, I know Mark is gonna love this.
Yeah, I mean, look, like Joe has been building this for quite some time. I mean, like to me, this scene feels like it's the payoff to the flashbacks we were getting through the first 5 issues of this run, with kind of Peter, like, more or less going on, young Peter going on this journey and determining that May was his maternal figure here. You know what I mean? But like it's such a wonderful scene because you have Jonah and Ricardo kind of having this fight and taking all agency from May in terms of like what we're gonna do about Peter, Jonah seems like to be more the aggressor here, but Ricardo is not like, he's not like, completely innocent here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
We can use my house, and it's like, oh, okay, we're already at the interview. I mean, Ricardo still thinks Peter is a drug addict, which, like, I think even May is like, no, that's not it.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
and granted, Jonah has like a whole other set of cards, which he like alludes to here. He's like, we're close in a way that he maybe isn't with his aunt,
Right. No, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But May just kind of putting the hammer down, but like not in a naive way, but in a very maternal way, which was just like, look, she's, she acknowledges, like, he's messed up. There's something wrong. What he's doing isn't right, but he's gonna come around because I've seen this before. And when he comes around, first we're gonna forgive him. Then I'm gonna kick him in the butt, and then I'm gonna make him wheat cakes, and then we're gonna get back on with our lives. And it's like, yeah, that's, like, that is family. You know what I mean?
That's someone who's read 63 years of Amazing Spider-Man comics.
Yeah. I mean, it's 63 years of Amazing Spider-Man comics, but it's also just like, it's the human condition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, let's not to get remotely political here, but like, let's be real. We're in very odd times right now in our world where people are kind of divided in a way that aren't typically divided. And yet, like, I'm thinking about, maybe because it's Thanksgiving in a couple of days, like I'm thinking about like the fact that like, but the thing that bonds us is family. You know what I mean? Like, now I sound like Vin Diesel, family.
Yeah, no,
family.
I mean, like, I've had my family broken up by all this politics stuff in a way that it isn't healed. And I'd like to hope that it can be, someday. Yeah.
I guess that's, maybe I'm overly optimistic because, like, yeah, I mean, I have massive disagreements and issues with folks in my family, but that, like, we're all going to gather on Thursday, and like, I'm personally excited for it.
Yeah.
Because, I'm hosting and I'm happy for it. I'm having people come over that are, they're not in-laws, but they're like kind of distant, separate, more removed family that I know. I mean, I've only met once or twice, but they're, like, I know I'm not going to be aligned with 100% on things, but it's like, hey, it's like, but it's family. I don't know. Like, I just really love the heart of what May had here. And yeah, it's certainly, like, I think this whole sequence is up in the pantheon of Parker's Have Gumption. I think it's up in the pantheon of the JMS run and the conversation issue. Like, this was just a really well-defined, articulate, intelligent, emotional, but like, emotionally grounded May, that we have not gotten a lot of in recent years. And, I don't think you would have any pushback on the fact that Joe Kelly has written the best Aunt May that we've had since probably the JMS era, right? I mean, is there any argument at this point?
I don't argue with that at all. And in ways that make me feel kind of silly, because, I have been kind of complaining about the way that this story had been structured, coming off of those first 5 issues, because yes, this continues that thread, but it's kind of a payoff for the sort of weird absence of May. And she says it right here, like, to Jameson and Ricardo, I'm not a doormat. I'm not a fool. I'm a mother.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I found myself in, Jameson and Ricardo's shoes, which was like kind of saying, why isn't May, being more aggressive and blah, 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 blah. And she basically, she might as well turn to me out from the page and said, that's actually not how I handle things. Yeah. And also it might as well Joe Kelly being like, hey, Dan, actually, I've got a stronger grasp on this character than you do. And you just need to trust me that I'm going to handle it. And I do. I'm sorry. You get whatever leeway now. You get May.
Yeah. And not for nothing, Dan. This is not me trying to explain any parenting to you, but you'll find as Ben gets older, there's just going to be times where
you got to let him go, as she says. Yeah,
you gotta let the kid fail. You know what I mean? I mean, my son just turned 14, and fortunately, he's doing great right now. But there have been more moments of oh, I actually can't interject right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought, when, certainly 11, 12 years ago when, he was 2 or 3, I did not expect would be happening in my life. But that's what parenthood is. It's a lot of just kind of sitting back, and you love and you care and you're there at the end of the day. But you can't stop the kids from screwing up.
But real world parenting aside, I don't think I've ever seen that level of maturity addressed to the role of parents in the pages of a Spider-Man comic.
No.
This is a new side.
Again, not since JMS.
Yeah, absolutely. And even then, I think this is
it's different. Yeah. And I think Joe's interview with us kind of insinuated that he's writing May from a very real place right now. That I don't know we've had previous creators write her from.
Absolutely. And I would say the same for Norman. That level of introspection about hey, I lie to myself about the things I desire. I'm I've never seen somebody outline the motivations of Norman and the Goblin before to that level of clarity. Cool. Let's go with that, because that puts a lot of that in perspective in a way that I've never seen someone address on the page. And maybe nobody had said it out loud, but I don't think anybody implied something like that, before. So, super cool, Joe. Keep going. Can we call him Joe? Cause we know him now.
I keep doing it. So I guess.
I do want to say, too, if people aren't picking up Radioactive Spider-Man, this sort of I don't even know what you want to call it, mini series that's being written by Joe Kelly alongside this, which I know we kind of razzed him about, hey man, you don't have to take on all of these things. That series, I think, is offering a really interesting counter to this story that's going on, because, and again, if you don't want to know anything about Radioactive Spider-Man, maybe skip ahead 30 seconds. Those issues are dealing with what is ostensibly a late stage dementia version of May Parker. Yes, she has a mutant virus that is turning her into a monster that kills people, but sometimes dealing with a parent with dementia that doesn't know their physical limitations or has no control of their physicality and the way they behave is kind of like that. And so here we've got a May that's sort of caring for Peter, from a distance. And there we've got a Peter that's caring for May from a distance in a different stage of her life. And I think it's a really interesting kind of mirror to this particular issue. So I wanted to kind of shout out that Kelly is kind of coming at it from both ends in a really interesting way across those titles. So good stuff. All right, Mark. What do you think of this issue? Let's give him a grade.
I'm going to give this a B+, which I think is probably the highest I've gone on these Earthbound issues so far. Definitely my favorite of that part of the storyline so far.
B+ for me too. I really enjoyed this one. I think there's some real like solid meat to kind of get into here. I've been loving the Peter stuff. It doesn't feel quite as weighty as this story does, especially with this issue, and I appreciate that contrast. But I feel like with this issue, I finally really am kind of like on the wavelength with like, what are the stakes? What are we doing here on Earth? So good stuff.
Awesome. All right, Dan. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode, but we want to thank you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk. This podcast exists because of the support of our listeners on Patreon, where for only $4.99 a month, the cost of a new comic, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews, the same week the comics release, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses.
Yeah, if you value smart comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. What we do on this show is admittedly niche. Still, if you find our Spider-Man commentary and community valuable, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on the Patreon. And in regards to our community, the Slack, it has been a really awesome place recently. We're even doing a Secret Santa in the Slack. And so man, you find your community where you can. And I'm glad that we found that community. I didn't even organize that. They took it upon themselves to organize it, and I'm happy to get on it. And I will say they did a big questionnaire of things you're interested in to kind of help facilitate people with the Secret Santa. And the final question was, is Amazing Fantasy 15 a fantasy to you? Yes or no? So there is that still lingering. Will I be Secret Santa'd Amazing Fantasy 15?
I mean, that would be something, Dan. I was going to say, did I get drafted into this? But I don't know because I'm not in the Slack all the time.
You did not, Mark. This is an entirely voluntary
now I feel
thing.
Sad. How do I get into it?
Well, come join the Slack. There's a link in there.
Right.
We'd love to have you be a part of this. Yeah.
Maybe I could send someone one of my Amazing Fantasy 15 facsimiles or something.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, this is where you send someone else your actual Amazing Fantasy 15 that's not me, and then I just go full Aunt May in Radioactive Spider-Man and kill everybody around me. What are you gonna do?
Right.
Yeah,
that would be like a Scarlet Witch and House of M moment, I think, for you if I did that. So
I'm just gonna send everybody a copy of the Spider-Man Super Special. And
I got two of them now, Dan. So,
hey, look, see, you could conceivably do that and not lose your collection.
Amazing. Did I tell? Actually, I don't know if we want to save this for the Patreon segment, Dan. But I was working on completing a run of adjectiveless Spider-Man recently, and I think for some reason my what do you call it, CLZ app, it must have incorrectly tagged an issue when I was importing it months ago, because as I'm I thought I had bought every issue, and then I'm putting things away, and all of a sudden I'm scrolling through, and I'm wait a second, there's no issue 28 in this box, and it was reading in my app that I had it, but it wasn't in, it wasn't anywhere to be found. I think it accidentally must have tagged another issue because I had 229. So it must have tagged a 28, 29 as a 28. Anyway, moral of the story was I thought I was I'm done with adjectiveless. No, I'm not. I have to go out and buy a 28 at some point, which is a $2 comic, but I'm just here we go again.
I've got a few of those. I'm rebuying issues because I thought I didn't mark it correctly or something like that. To be completely fair, on this tangent, their scanning is not as accurate as it used to be. Whatever update they did, it has a hard time finding comics
Yeah.
now. Okay, this is not a criticism of CLZ, which is awesome, amazing service.
I love that app.
Yeah,
It's a great app.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, support us on Patreon and join our Slack. So, Mark, until our mortal enemies adopt our haircuts and fashion sense, what's our motto?
Oof.
God help
Pity
them.
Yeah, right. With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
Don't miss the next installment. Spider-Man seems a web.